so much for taking the time to join us in person, and for those of us who are online, thank you for taking the time to join us as well. I'd like to welcome you all to the inaugural Health Translation Queensland Research Integrity Advisor showcase, really, and the whole purpose of today's event really is about giving you a taste of what it is to be a research integrity advisor and why you, or actually more importantly, I should probably flip that question and say, why not you? Before we actually get started, I'd like to pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging, and acknowledge the traditional landowners on which we meet today, for there are many, because I understand that there are quite a few representatives who are coming from Tasmania, Western Australia, of course, across the eastern seaboard as well, and those of you in person. So welcome, everybody. My name is Sonia Hancock. I'm the Acting Director of Research Development here at Metro South Health. How this session came to be was really a collective of like-minded individuals, so research integrity advisors across the HTQ partnership. So there's about 10, 13 now, I think. It certainly is a growing partnership, but it's made up of health services, as well as academic research institutes, the academic sector, and certainly growing seemingly with each passing day. But what it was is when we got together, we kind of had an understanding that we're all facing the same dilemmas, we're all facing the same questions, yet there is sort of no clear mechanism of how we can share learnings and actually work together to support one another through these processes. I'm going to stop here and actually let the professionals do all the talking. So I'm humbled to be joined by a panel of experts. So Dr. Mark Hooper over in the corner, you'll see him shortly on screen, from QUT, who is the Manager of Research Ethics and Integrity at QUT. Then our second speaker is Rob McDowall, who's our Research Integrity Officer from CSIRO. And then we're very, very privileged to actually having a living and breathing research integrity advisor who's located on campus, Professor Ray Steptoe from the University of Queensland. So again, welcome to you all, and without further ado, Mark.
Great. So thank you so much for the kind introduction, Sonia, and thank you for the time, everybody. I'll see if this works. We're going to figure this out live because I've got a bit of a game for us all. I don't know whether it's technically a game, but I'm going to ask you all to use your devices and do this thing where you either use the code or go to menti.com and use that code. That goes for all of you online too, please. I'm not going to be able to bring this up on screen, but I've got my phone, so we're going to see if it works via phone. So I called it a game. I don't know whether it's a game per se, but what I'm actually going to do is ask you some questions. And I think they're very difficult questions. And they're about applying principles of research integrity to the complexities of life. Hopefully you all had time to sort of get there. Hopefully you see a screen that says, great, you've joined. Can anyone nod at me here? Good. So what these questions have in common is that it's one thing to know what the principles of integrity might be, to make a list of them. One of them's fairness, do what is fair. But it's another thing to figure out how to actually apply those principles in the complexities of research life. So, there are local norms, disciplinary norms, power relationships, difficult relationships. Integrity cases are so often caught up with difficult relationships. The need for funding, the need for publications, and so forth. One thing I do want to say about this is I don't think anyone's on the other side of this argument. I've come across people recently who want this dichotomy between sort of code sticklers on the one hand, maybe people like me who sit in central offices and the complexities of researchers out there in the faculties. But I work in integrity, and I can tell you I've never met anyone who's on the other side of this argument. Everyone thinks that understanding integrity involves being able to actually apply the principles of integrity in the complexities of research life. So with that in mind, let's play a game. I'm going to call it a game. It's inspired by a game created by Erasmus University in Rotterdam in the Netherlands. So you might like to look that up and play. They've got a deck of cards. They've got an app. It's very cool. But here's how we're going to play. You're going to imagine you're a research integrity advisor. We don't quite know what that is yet, but for the moment, it's someone who advises about research integrity. And students are going to come to you for advice about tricky issues. You're going to have 4 options to choose from. And here's the rub. I reckon you won't like any of them. Quite very, very probably you won't like any of these options, but still, this is the game. Please pick one. Maybe be prepared in your mind to argue for that option. I think It's going to reveal what you're prepared to give up to get something else, if that makes sense. You're going to have to make a trade-off in your mind. Okay, so just to reiterate, you're a research integrity advisor. Students walked into your office, and here is what she says. A fellow PhD student made me this offer. If I make her a co-author on my paper, she'll do the same for me. The idea is that we'll proofread each other's drafts, which should improve their quality. She says she's coming up for a potential job opportunity soon and needs publications. I'm about to submit a paper. What should I do? And here are 4 things you might say. You've got to pick one. Imagine yourself actually saying it. Accept the offer, but keep it quiet. That's just how academia works. You can't make this a habit, but we need to be pragmatic. Ask her to proofread thoroughly and let her be an author on your paper this one time. She really does need a publication to stand the chance for that job. Accept the offer, but only on the condition that you critically analyze each other's data. Although the student worries, she probably doesn't have time for that. Decline the offer, and you should report that to her supervisor. So let's see if the magic of my phone works. I'm going to try and move to the next part of Menti. If you look at your devices, can anybody nod at me if you have like an option? Cool. All right, please pick one, A, B, C, or D. On your devices, can you see the graph come up after you make the decision? Is that how that works? After you lock it in? No, some of you can, some of you can't. Yeah. I'll describe it to you in a minute. Give people 30 more seconds. All right, so I can tell you, I'm sorry that you can't see it, but I'll describe the results to you. 0 people wanted A. That's quite interesting. 1 person wanted B. That's great. Then the big 2 were C and D. 34 people wanted C and 39 people wanted D. So that's quite an interesting split between C and D here. Now, what's nice about this game, I suspect very few of you locked it in sure that you picked the very best answer that's possible. Is anyone willing to say, anyone who chose C, are you willing to say why you chose C and not D? Is anyone willing to say that? Yeah.
Yep. So I picked C, and that was really, I guess, it gives the student the opportunity to kind of make that decision for themselves. If you're giving them that advice, they need to work out whether they're willing to put in the time and the effort. I think as long as you've got a process in place that makes it appropriate, then that's fine. But just saying decline the offer maybe doesn't allow for people to then have those conversations because you're shutting that down. And, you know, maybe that's good in some cases, but I guess, you know, people need to have a bit of wiggle room.
Yeah, no, that's good. I don't know if people online can hear me. Does anyone have any idea? I'll just try and summarize very quickly. Forgive me if I don't get this quite right, but it tells the student the conditions under which it would be acceptable and leaves them to make the decision about whether they want to go ahead with that and gives them that option. Is anyone willing perhaps to say why they chose D at the expense of C?
I'm happy to do that. I'm Julie.
D over C purely for the fact that she probably wouldn't be able to critically analyze the data. Yeah, so. But I declined the offer, but I don't know about and reporting to the supervisor. I think it's still within the team, colleagues. You can have the discussion there.
Yeah, no, that's good. Just to try and summarize for people online. So reporting to the supervisor is not so bad. It's still within the team. It's not escalating too much. And also a defect of C is that it seems impractical, and a solution that's not possible, you know, can't be the right solution on those grounds. So the game is useful in this respect. It shows the assumptions that we bring to these in order to try and solve them. Here's a different kind of challenge for you. This was inspired by some tweets that I read recently about, I think this is basically a real scenario. 3 people, Alfred, Ben, and Claire, co-authored a paper and submitted it. Okay. Peer review revealed that the analysis was flawed in some respects. Not like an integrity concern or anything, just some mistakes. It happens. The analysis was contributed by Ben, and Ben only contributed that analysis, which was flawed. The problem is Ben probably could rerun it, but now he can't be contacted for anything you want to imagine. Maybe he's sick, maybe he's off grid, you know, maybe there's been a team falling out. Anyway, they can't contact Ben. So along comes Dora, who's another colleague in the lab, and she joined the team after peer review. and she performed the analysis competently or very well, and she performed it in a different way. So to really spell this out, Ben made a contribution to the original paper. It had some flaws. It happens. Peer review showed that his contribution was flawed. And now Dora has made that contribution instead in the paper that has been published. And my question for you is, who should be an author of the final paper? Let's see if I can skip to the next. Yeah, so your options, what are your options? All of them, A, B, and C, A, B, and D, or some other thing that you wish to imagine. Great, just a few more seconds. Cool, so I can tell you that a large majority selected all authors. That's the first option. 41 of you said, it's still growing, 42 said A, B, C, and D. One person said A, B, and C only, the original people. 8 people said A, B, and D, Alfred, Ben, and the new contributor, Dora, leaving out Ben. And 16 of you said other, and I just want to know what that is, but that sounds great. Could anyone who said other describe other? Yes, please, Sonia.
So the authors would be A, C, and D with an acknowledgement to them.
Very nice. Factoring in acknowledgement. So Sonia said the authors should be A, C, and D with an acknowledgement to Ben. Great. Would somebody, the large majority of you who said all of them, provide a brief justification for that view? Yes, Gordon.
So all of them have contributed substantially to the paper, and as such should be offered the opportunity to meet the other criteria. Even though Ben, his analysis may have been flawed, he would have contributed substantially, potentially in other ways, and as such may have fulfilled other criteria, therefore should be offered the opportunity to be an author, notwithstanding the fact his analysis was flawed. Presumably Dora contributed and was then offered the opportunity.
Yeah, no, great, thank you. So they all made, just to reiterate quickly, I'm not going to do it justice, but they all made a significant contribution. His analysis was flawed, it happens. It's not his fault that he wasn't there to agree. Is that fair, Gordon? Yes, indeed. Okay, one more. I know we're short on time, so just one more if I may. A student comes to you, they say, the paper I worked on very hard is nearly finished. Next week is the deadline for the special edition of a prestigious journal. Another student just emailed me a link to a paper online that looks very similar to mine. A model that I present as new in my paper has already been published. Luckily, it was published in a lesser known journal. What should I do? And here are the things you should imagine yourself saying. At this late point, it's best to pretend to have never read that paper. The reviewers probably won't have heard of it either. Where your paper overlaps with the other paper, discuss it. Although there is some risk that your paper will be rejected due to a lack of substantive contribution. Reference the other paper, but don't discuss it. Preserve the impression that your paper is original as much as possible. You've been scooped, it happens, drop this paper and focus on another project. All right, let me just try and get to that. Hopefully you can vote now on scooped. All right, so the very vast majority of you, 59 of you, have said that where your paper overlaps with the other paper, discuss it. I think that looks straightforwardly like the most honest thing to do, so good on you guys. But it is a very hard conclusion to come to, isn't it? At the risk of being rejected, that is the chief contribution. For the second time, I should just say that the fun way to play this game, I played with my colleagues Anne Walsh, who's our director, and Melissa Tate, who's our research integrity officer. We're playing with integrity advisors across QUT. And a fun way to play is to really unpack the assumptions that you've each brought to this. Because when you investigate a concern or discuss a concern, that's what you need to find out. It's sort of the list of things we should establish to come to the right judgment about this. Today, my point is just to ask you how you went, how you found that. If you find yourself interested in these dilemmas, or if you think that being able to have practical wisdom in resolving these dilemmas is important to our quality and our research culture, then you may very well make a good research integrity advisor. And with that, I'll pass over to the next speaker.
Thank you so much for that presentation. I think this really articulates that research integrity is nothing different. It's nothing new insofar as aligning with your own core values and your own integrity, your own code of conduct. I think that's what I really want to draw in, particularly for those of you who are in Metro South and are thinking of becoming research integrity advisors, is think about how research integrity or speaking up for research aligns with your own code of conduct and your own integrity. Without further ado, over to you.
Thank you, Sonia. So hi everyone, my name is Rob McDowall. I am the Research Integrity Officer and Human Ethics Team Leader at CSIRO. Firstly, I'd just like to thank Health Translation Queensland Metro South Hospital for having me and giving me the opportunity to speak to you all today. And thank you to you all for coming either here at TRI or online. So as has been said a couple of times, today we're here to learn about what a research integrity advisor is, and hopefully for some of you spark an interest in undertaking that role at your institutions. So before I begin, I'd just like to really quickly echo Sonia's acknowledgement of country from the start of today and pay my respects to the traditional owners of the lands from which we're all on. So research forms the foundation of our knowledge about our world. And we've learned many amazing and beneficial things through the research that we've done as a society already. And the impacts of these findings are really wide-ranging and far-reaching. But when we think about health research in particular, we rely on our patients trusting that they'll be informed and cared for. And although there are risks involved in their participation in research, that they're going to be kept safe. They also expect that the information that they're putting themselves at risk for us to find out through our research is going to produce high quality results and that those are going to help future patients. Now, protecting this trust is a really important responsibility that we take on as researchers. Sorry, I'm just going to quickly adjust something on the screen there. So trust can be a really tricky thing. It can take time to build. It can be easily lost, and when we lose it, it can be really difficult to re-establish. It can also be lost through, I guess, poorly considered actions rather than just ones that are sort of deliberately problematic. So this is why ensuring that we maintain trust in research is key to our ongoing ability to keep doing that as individuals, for our institutions, and also as a broader community. We also need to constantly hold ourselves to the highest standards of practice in our research and to eliminate poor or even questionable practices when we find them. So this brings us to how we tackle the challenges of trust in research in Australia, and therefore along to the Australian Code for the Responsible Conduct of Research. So in its own words, the Australian and international community expect research to be conducted responsibly, ethically, and with integrity. The Australian Code for the Responsible Conduct of Research articulates the broad principles that characterise an honest, ethical, conscientious research culture. It establishes a framework for responsible research that provides a foundation for high-quality research, credibility, and community trust in the research endeavour. It also outlines the expectations for research not only that's conducted in Australia, but also research that's conducted under the auspices of Australian institutions. So in case you're not familiar with the code, it's comprised of 8 principles, which you can see on the screen there, and these underpin responsible research conduct. They are honesty and rigour in the development, undertaking, and reporting of research, transparency in declaring interests and reporting research methodology, data and findings, fairness in the treatment of others, respect for research participants, the wider community, animals and the environment, recognition of the right of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples to be engaged in research that is of particular significance to them or affects them, accountability for the development, undertaking and reporting of research, and promotion of responsible research conduct practices. So alongside these principles, the code has 29 key responsibilities for researchers and institutions, and it's also supported by 9 guides that cover in much more detail specific areas of research conduct, like authorship, collaborative research, and data management. So although the code does a really wonderful job at distilling an undertaking as complicated as maintaining the integrity of research into a relatively short document and these key principles and responsibilities, it's a lot of information to consider when we're actually undertaking a research project. And this can be challenging even for the most experienced of researchers. So those of us which work in research institutions or institutions that are doing research, which I'm going to hazard a guess is the vast majority of people here and online today. Hopefully we're all aware that our institutions have lots of policies and procedures that talk about how research should be conducted. So those might be things like how authorship of publications is determined, the processes we have to go through if we're doing research with humans or animals that require ethical review, and how potential breaches might be managed. Many institutions also have an Office of Research Integrity, or might have a different name, but something similar, who support the organisation and its researchers with compliance with research integrity standards and the management of issues when they arise. Now, all of these things are really important to help us maintain the highest standards of research when we're doing it as an organisation. So although this support is really valuable, I would comfortably put a substantial wager on most people, even those here today who obviously have an interest, not having read all of the policies and procedures that their organisation has put out. And although the support provided by an Office of Research Integrity or similar is really useful and really important, sometimes those offices can be very busy. It can be hard to get in touch with them, particularly if you're in a rush. Sometimes people don't feel comfortable reaching out to them because sometimes they're also involved in the management of issues when they arise. And also sometimes, although the staff in those organisations, myself included, I hope, are highly skilled, we sometimes don't have that specific on-the-ground experience or knowledge that you might be after when you're seeking support. And all of this brings us to why the code recommends that institutions have research integrity advisors. So it defines the role of a research integrity advisor as a person or persons with knowledge of the code and institutional processes, nominated by an institution to promote the responsible conduct of research and provide advice to those with concerns or complaints about potential breaches of the code. So although it's not always the case, research integrity advisors are generally researchers within an organisation who undertake a role as part of a peer support network to support a culture of good research practice. So you may know that in this definition for the role, there are 2 key aspects. The first of these is promoting the responsible conduct of research, and the second is providing advice when there are concerns or complaints. So I'm just going to go into these 2 things in a little bit more detail. So there are several ways that research integrity advisors promote a culture of research excellence and responsible research conduct in their organisations. So firstly, they lead by example. So they model the values of the code, they conduct their own research responsibly, and they're open to continuous improvement and learning in the space of research integrity. Secondly, they provide advice on good research practice to others. So this is something that research integrity advisors can do not only when they're approached for support, but also when they're out there just working with their colleagues and they see a situation where they might be able to volunteer to help out. Thirdly, they support organisational initiatives to promote good practice. Now, there's quite a range here. Some research integrity advisors get very actively involved in education and training that's delivered by their institutions. But at other institutions, it can be a much simpler approach. It may be something as simple as just helping your Office of Research Integrity make sure that they're communicating things effectively in your part of the organisation, providing a bit of that feedback. So we take ourselves to the second part of that role around providing support for concerns. So research integrity advisors have a key role when these sorts of concerns arise. They undertake a really important role by providing timely, clear, impartial and confidential advice to people who have concerns. Now, this could be through a lot of mechanisms. It could be through providing information about the code and organisational policies. It could be providing suggestions as to how an issue could be addressed between the parties involved, rather than necessarily going into a formal process. It could be supporting somebody to initiate a formal complaint if that's needed. It could be also referring somebody to other sources of support within an organisation. Or sometimes a research integrity advisor might be approached about a matter that's not really a research integrity issue, or as Mark mentioned before, sometimes they can be quite complicated and caught up with other issues such as bullying and harassment or other HR issues. And so sometimes there might also be referral through to other parts of an organisation where needed. It's also really important to note that research integrity advisors are not responsible for some things. So research integrity advisors are not responsible for investigating or assessing potential breaches of the code. And they're also not expected to act as a mediator or advocate that might take sides in a dispute that might be going on. So the role is really importantly one about impartial support that doesn't take sides and just provides factual information or advice that a person can then take on board and decide how they're going to proceed, rather than telling them what they need to do or providing your opinion about the situation. And these limits are really important because they help ensure that research integrity advisors are seen as somebody that can be approached by anyone. So, a neutral party that everyone can feel comfortable coming to if they need to. So who can be a research integrity advisor? What does that look like? Well, it is everyone really, but the code sets out several characteristics of who an institution should appoint to that role. So institutions need to think about making sure they have research integrity advisors who are from a diverse range of backgrounds and with different levels of experience, and think about having the right number. And if they're, say, like CSIRO is a quite large multi-site organisation, making sure that they're appropriately spread out so they're accessible for people. So at CSIRO, to give an example, we have 15 research integrity advisors nationally. They're spread across our different business units and our sites. And they have a really wide range of experience, and they come from all different backgrounds as well. And that's really important in allowing them to support each other when they're providing advice too. But any research integrity advisor that's appointed by an institution will share a set, I guess, of characteristics. And you can see a lot of those up on the screen there. So people with strong research experience and analytical skills, who have empathy and discretion and sensitivity that enables them to be approachable and effective communicators. In addition to being familiar with their institution's processes and the code, as I've mentioned a couple of times already, they also must be modelling the values of good research conduct and have an interest in that continuous improvement and research excellence. So one thing I do hear people ask when I'm talking to them about becoming a research integrity advisor is that seems like a lot to know and do. It can sort of almost seem a bit overwhelming at points. So there's a few things that I think are really worth knowing here. So the first thing is that as a research integrity advisor, you are not expected to know everything. As I mentioned before, there are lots of facets to good research conduct and no one can be an expert in all of them. So while as a research integrity advisor, there will be many things that you can just provide direct support with because you already know how you can do that, you will often find yourself, as I said, referring to others. And there'll also be situations where somebody approaches you about something and you have to say to them, that's really interesting. I don't actually know the answer to this situation. So let's sit down together and go and have a look and see what we can find out. Maybe we might be looking up another institution's policies and procedures if it's an issue that's involving another institution or a journal or something like that. In these cases, it's really okay to be upfront about the limits of your knowledge and taking that person on the journey so they can help themselves better potentially the next time. And also you're gaining that knowledge so you can help somebody if they come up with the same issue in the future. Acknowledging those limits of your knowledge doesn't actually have or damage your role as a trusted advisor. So your institution will also provide you with support if you undertake the role of being a research integrity advisor. So in addition to providing you with induction training to help you further develop your knowledge and provide you with a lot of practical information about how to undertake the role in your institution, they will also make sure you have the time and facilities that you need to provide support and give you access to ongoing training and development. And really importantly, ensure that your own wellbeing is supported as you undertake the role, because sometimes you will be approached by people who might be in a situation that they're finding quite stressful. It can be very easy to take that on. So again, I guess to give an example of what institutional support might look like, at CSIRO, we have a really comprehensive induction program that we take all our new research integrity advisors through. And then throughout the year, we meet as a group on an ongoing basis. And that we find that really useful. It gives us an opportunity to discuss in a very confidential way any challenges we've seen arising across the organisation, perhaps to talk about particular discussions we had and get feedback on whether we think there were things that we could have done better. And also, it's a good opportunity for us to develop our skills further. I have to thank Mark for telling me about that Erasmus dilemma game, because I've used that with our research integrity advisors in our training as well. And yeah, develop our skills in other areas. So sometimes we get talks done on different topics from both internal and external people. And of course, you know, I'm very biased in saying this, but I really think that that community of practice that we've been able to build up with our research integrity advisor network has really helped us to be able to provide really good support across the organisation. So to echo a message you've heard a couple of times today, if you believe in helping maintain the integrity of our research system and supporting and mentoring your colleagues through the challenges that this can entail, then please put your hand up to be a research integrity advisor at your institution. It's a fantastic opportunity to help others. And also it's an opportunity for you to build important skills and experience that could help you in your research career as well. And remember, even if you decide, look, being a research integrity advisor is not quite for me, too busy, or I'm not quite sure I'm ready for that role yet, you can still support research integrity in your organisation by promoting good practice and providing support in an informal way wherever you can. So there's a QR code on the screen that should provide a link through to a page that has all the research integrity contacts for the organisations in the HTQ partnership. But if your organisation's not on there and you've attended today, welcome. And know that you can reach out to your ethics and governance office about so putting your hand up for that role. I know some organisations are still in the early stages of setting up their research integrity advisor networks, but even if they are in that position, I know they'd be really interested to know who's interested in taking on that role. So thank you.
Okay, so thank you so much, Rob. That was really insightful in terms of what it actually looks like to be a research integrity advisor. I actually have a very good example right here. So Professor Ray Steptoe is joining us to really provide that day-to-day insight of what it actually means and how you, as in each and every single one of you here, as well as those of you online, can actually assign yourselves up using the QR code and get moving on the path forward in terms of becoming a research integrity advisor. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Thanks for the invitation, and thanks for everybody for turning up. I'd reiterate my acknowledgement of country that everybody else has stated, and acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land that we're meeting on today. I've been a research integrity advisor at UQ. I'm one of two for the Faculty of Medicine, and I've been in that role for around about 3 years. And over that time, I've fielded a lot of formal inquiries, and I've had a lot of very informal discussions, and I find the informal discussions are often very, very useful. For me personally, I feel my role is around the two components that have been mentioned. One is education and dissemination of information, and the other is providing support for individuals who have questions, queries or concerns about activities or things that they've been involved with. So in terms of education, I organise within our institution, that's the Fraser Institute, training sessions. And currently for this year, we're organising 2 training sessions. One, our standard UQ responsible conduct of research at UQ training, and then we plan to have a more kind of advanced workshop this year where we go into kind of more novel, current kind of dilemmas, the influence of or the impact of artificial intelligence. For instance, GP that's generating a lot of chatter at the moment, and those kinds of things. And really what we need to be able to do is to, as explained on slide number 1, set the standard for some of the kind of situational norms. And a lot of people come into the field without understanding, you know, what's acceptable, what's not acceptable. One of the things that we can do is kind of convey to people, particularly ECRs and students, kind of what the expectation is. And yeah, well, it might be okay to do this to your figure, but it's not okay to do that to your figure. And maybe what you need to do to understand what you can do is go and look at the journal guidelines around what you need to do for preparation of your figures. So we sort of send people off to hunt down the resources for themselves. We empower them to kind of find the information for themselves. And so in terms of resolution of kind of informal meetings or questions around kind of research integrity, we, as outlined, we don't really provide people with you should do this, you should do that. And in fact, at UQ, we don't actually really officially provide advice. But what we do is help people to understand their options and to work through the principles of what the question is themselves. And so we point people towards, you know, current UQ policies and procedures and the relevant components of the code. And so the dilemmas are a good one because no clear answers for those. And sometimes really when you have an inquiry, it's about providing an environment where people can feel that they're comfortable discussing things with you. You need to explain that there's limited confidentiality, because according to the code, if you become aware of research misconduct, then you're obliged to report that. But otherwise, the meetings are completely confidential and nobody that doesn't need to know gets to know about anything. And you provide a comfortable environment where they can kind of have a chat. And then sometimes your job is really to unpack the circumstances of what people are discussing with you. It might be some of those things like pressure to publish, interpersonal relationships, power imbalance. And sometimes it's a cluster of those things that kind of come together to generate a question that somebody has. And so, for instance, you know, we can provide ways forward for people to help themselves resolve issues like the authorship one. How do you map out the contributions? Because that's an important part of working out who should be the author. How do you map out the contributions? Was Ben's contribution still a real contribution after the changes? And you kind of need to map that out on an individual basis. And so, you know, kind of what we do really on a practical sense is to kind of map those things out and help people kind of work towards a solution for themselves. And often at the start of a meeting, we will ask individuals what is it that they want to achieve from the meeting. And then we kind of hope to achieve that and have them go away with some strategies. We might point people to HR, we might point people to kind of other experts as has been kind of outlined. So I think that's kind of my impressions of my role as an RIA. I kind of find it very rewarding, helping people to kind of move forward with their research. And I thought we were having a Q&A. So while people are kind of getting their chat questions together, then we can kind of have some local questions. But that's really my impressions of the role of an RIA. Do we have any chat questions? Questions from the room?
Certainly, yes, go on.
So Ray, do you, like,
Yes.
as well as being an RIA, do you find yourself kind of being a research mentor also?
Yeah, people definitely come to you because they know that you're kind of across the information, and I have a lot of theoretical conversations about people, and that's quite good because people can come to me. They don't want to kind of have a formal meeting, but I know somebody who blah blah blah, and they'll run a kind of theoretical scenario past you, and that can help them kind of work through maybe some of their choices, or they can go away and talk to somebody else that they might be dealing with. And I think that's a really good thing that an RIA can do. Not all of the kind of things that we do are formal meetings, yeah.
And do you feel that training is sufficient? I mean, you said you're running some training sessions, so I assume that's just for RIAs, is it, or for?
So that's for our researchers, our students and you know, researchers. And so we think that the best way to deal with research integrity issues is to make sure that they don't arise. And so we need to be proactive about helping people understand where the grey areas are and how they might resolve the grey areas, and how to empower them not to get caught up in things that they might not want to get caught up into, and how to kind of preserve their research integrity.
But how do you multiply the message, given there's a lot of people and there aren't many of you? Like, there's a lot of students, you won't get everyone there. How do you multiply a message to make sure it's permeated?
Give it multiple times. Yeah. So UQ students do an online unit, but we will deliver that in a workshop as well. And we try to make these as kind of mandatory as possible. So, we try to get as many people on board as possible, and we deliver it. The last one we did was, it was 2 years ago. So we try and deliver it fairly frequently. Yeah.
Got a question from the chat from Adrian Barnett. Have you seen confusion between the role of research integrity advisors and research ethics officers?
Yeah, I think by research ethics you mean human and animal ethics committees. Yeah, it's kind of interesting. Sometimes there's a little bit of confusion because they kind of fall under research ethics. Seems to be kind of like a subset of what people think falls under research integrity. But I don't really get too many people coming to me and asking me about how do I deal with my mouse ethics, or how do I deal with my human ethics. So, and I haven't really fielded questions around, how I might go about setting up a study, for instance, so that it kind of conforms to human ethics. That we seem to have that fairly well covered, I think, at least at UQ. Yep.
But on Adrian's point, why is there really a difference between a research integrity advisor and an ethics officer or a research integrity officer? Should there be a difference? Should you still?
Well, I think what I'm doing is categorising them based on whether you're filling out the human ethics form, or whether you're kind of dealing with, that's the nuts and bolts of getting an approval, basically. Yeah. So that's kind of how I see the demarcation between them. Yeah, I think certainly we've come across things where, there's been things around the practice of human ethics that kind of then crosses over a little bit into the research integrity space. So that does happen. Yep. Trying not to be too specific about things here.
Certainly, there is an opportunity for anyone involved in research management to act as a resource. I can't even get my words out. Research mentor / nominal advisor, not literally taking on that mantle, but I think where we need to shift our conversations is from having nominated people to everyone understanding that research integrity sits across the continuum, regardless of where you are. And it's a conversation that you're having as you're developing protocols, as you're engaging with your collaborators, having an understanding that the Australian community expects research to be conducted within high quality and high integrity. So transitioning those conversations from the compliance kind of, if you've done something wrong, you'll get, hauled up to the principal's office, to more of a peer-to-peer facilitatory conversation where we're introducing conformance and research integrity as a cultural norm.
Yeah, I really encourage people to have that conversation. And, research integrity is kind of fairly broad. It's about record keeping, what's the flow of evidence from your experiments through to your records. Have you got that covered? There's a whole bunch of stuff that really kind of falls under responsible research. They're all components of good experimental design, good experimental practice. They actually overlap significantly. Yep.
Any questions? Yeah.
Another one. So Adam Irwin says, it's unclear why research integrity advisors, with their understanding of the code, are not involved in the inevitable investigations which are occasionally necessary. Can you comment?
Well, it's a requirement of the code, basically. And I think a component of that is that we need to be approachable and we need to be, as RIAs, people they can come and kind of have a conversation with. And in fact, if you've been involved in an initial kind of discussion, then it's maybe inappropriate that you're involved in an investigation in any case, because you may have already formed some kind of an opinion. And really, in an investigation, you need to be impartial and look at the evidence that's there, basically. Yeah.
Any other questions?
Got one from the So Robert Stanton says, what strategies do you use to develop a culture of research integrity and confidence in RIAs?
Well, so the confidence in the RIAs is about having comfortable conversations with people and having sensible conversations with people and conveying practical advice, I think, so that things that people can take away. In terms of developing a culture of good research practice, then I think that every time you have a conversation, there's an opportunity to encourage good research practice, responsible research practice. And from my point of view, I think running workshops, getting this concept of research integrity and good research practice, because really that's what research integrity is, getting it to the top of people's conversation wherever possible. Yeah.
I know you've already alluded to some of this, but someone said, what training would be required to be involved? I don't know if Rob wants to comment on that.
So I can certainly speak to the training that we offer our research integrity advisors at CSIRO. So we acknowledge, first of all, that the people we're appointing as research integrity advisors already have, pretty good understanding of the code, a good practice, and obviously expertise in their areas of research. So we don't take an approach of going all the way back to the basics and, boring people to tears by, going over that all again. Instead, our aim is very much around enhancing that knowledge. So maybe checking in on some of it, diving into areas that people may be less familiar with. So an example would be that at CSIRO, we have a lot of research that involves Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples across the organisation, but not all of our research integrity advisors come from that area, or that background of doing that sort of research. So we actually put a bit of time and effort in our training sessions to talking more about that, so that our research integrity advisors are better equipped if questions come up there. So I guess to do a really quick coverage of it, the way we do our sessions is sort of 3 or 4 half-day sessions with our research integrity advisors, often virtual because we're spread out all over the country and it can be hard to bring everyone together, particularly in the last couple of years. And in the first session, we talk really broadly about the code and what a research integrity advisor is and how it's all set up at CSIRO. In the middle 2 sessions, we talk more specifically about the different sort of aspects of the interactions that you might have, the different topics that might be covered, checking in on lots of the other parts of CSIRO as an organisation that support different aspects of research integrity, so people know where to go out for referrals and things like that. And in the last session, we really take a look at the discussions that you have as a research integrity advisor itself. So we talk about, as Ray said, at the start of that discussion, and maybe having a discussion about confidentiality, and also making sure that we're actually getting the person who's come in to seek support to where they would like to be at the end of that discussion. And things like how to draw information out, how to be a good listener, all those sorts of really practical skills that can help a research integrity advisor have a really beneficial interactions.
And so at UQ, we have 2 to 3 workshops a year across the RIA network. And there we'll have a group discussion around what business we've had over the last 2 to 3 months or whatever, what kind of inquiries we've had, how that might have been resolved and what we can learn from those inquiries. And then there'll be some more advanced things along the lines that we've talked about. At the last one we had kind of like an hour on copyright and how to deal with copyright and what the expectations are around copyright. HR will come in and kind of provide us with insights into HR process and stuff. So it's kind of not so much what you do as a researcher, but the additional skills that you can bring in and additional expertise and insights that you can bring in to help you kind of work through some of the things that you might encounter in inquiries. And, you know, recently we've talked about the time commitment expected of an RIA, and at UQ the expectation is around about an hour a week. So, you know, it's definitely not onerous, and I'd say that was pretty fair expectation. Yeah.
Fabulous. Thank you so much to both of you, and also to Dr. Mark Cooper over in the corner. I'm going to be a little bit selfish now and take 5 minutes of your time just to talk about where Metro South sits in terms of the research integrity framework. So in Metro South, we are definitely committed to conducting research that aids the translation of new and innovative research, as well as improving patient outcomes, as suggested certainly in our 2021 to 2024 research strategy. But more importantly, we really want to hone in and focus on research that is conducted with integrity, that research is being done for the participants and about the participants, and in compliance, obviously, with the appropriate ethical and legal standards. But really, research integrity is a vital element that underpins what we do here in Metro South in terms of our research excellence. And in support of this commitment, we've established the research integrity online modules, which I have to give all due credit to Erica Wright, our Acting Manager of Research Integrity and Compliance, who has, in collaboration with others, established a really robust research integrity training and opportunities in terms of identifying the fact that we have a policy framework, we have our research capability and excellence in research framework. I just said that, didn't I? And of course, abiding by the applicable regulatory requirements. So really the excellence framework is available on our website. So if you Google Metro South Research, and I sillily didn't have it pinned up before, but if you Google Metro South Research and under our researchers identify research integrity, there is a splash page that houses not only the excellence framework, but the education and training initiatives. We also have an expression of interest form available for those Metro South staff who are wanting to become research integrity advisors, but certainly we do open up the conversations to all and encourage each one of you in the room as well as online to make contact with your research office. There's, like we've said before, that I'm more than sure that the research officers would be absolutely delighted in receiving self-nominations for peer-to-peer research integrity advisors. So on that wonderful note, I will conclude today's session and thank our wonderful speakers. So Dr. Mark Cooper again from QUT, Rob McDowall from CSIRO, and Professor Ray Steptoe from UQ. And thank you for your time.